Look!
My family's been fighting them for centuries.
Your blood comes from dukes, them great houses. Here, we're equal. What we do for the benefit of all.
Well, I'd very much like to be equal to you.
Maybe I'll show you the way.
Deal with this prophet. Set assassins.
Haderach, he's psychotic.
I see possible futures all at once. And in so many futures, our enemies prevail. But I do see a way. There is a narrow way through. My allegiance is to you. Do you believe me?
This is a form of power that our world has not yet seen. The ultimate power.
I want you to know I will love you as long as I breathe.
You will never lose me as long as you stay who you are.
Consider what you're about to do before the trade is
This prophecy is how they enslave us! You are not prepared for what is to come.
So we showed you the June film by Herbert, which that was June 2, which is really brilliant. But we can see now the immense power of someone who can see the futures in the multiverse and find the pathway to achieve the future he wants, usurping the evil empire and the evil emperor and the Harkonnens, who are the evil that has taken hold of the empire, and bring them down. So we can see now that instead of remote viewing, when we make it precognitive, simply being a useful tool, it controls the future. Because if you're the prime remote viewer who can remotely view the future and make sure that no one else can get ahead of you in time to remotely view the future ahead of you. So think of it like an arms race. The first one to achieve the collapse of the total quantum wave function of the multiverse can then make sure that anyone that follows him, be it the American deep state program using their hypnotic remote viewers plugged into AI and kept in that state and controlled by AI, who are trying desperately to collapse the total quantum wave function ahead of the prime remote viewer, can never get there because the prime remote viewer collapses the total quantum wave function to make sure they're extinguished and all of their powers not only are vanquished but come to him, a remote viewing vampire from the precognitive viewpoint. And in the Herbert film, which is good, we have the Kwisatz Haderach, a genetically engineered super soldier, the end of a bloodline of breeding that allows a human, in fact he's no longer a human, but a next species, to be able to remotely view the multiverse and to also have the capability to collapse the quantum wave function of the totality of the multiverse to produce the timeline he wants. And this, of course, should have been a female, according to the Bene Gesserit. These psychic nuns. But due to love, one of the Bene Gesserit nuns bred a male to produce this Kwisatz Haderach male. Now, the Kwisatz Haderach males face the source, females face chaos. So if we had a Kwisatz Haderach female, she would have plunged the multiverse into evil and chaos. But since we had a Kwisatz Haderach male, he plunged the multiverse and collapsed it into the source. We'll go into what the source is and the backstory to real religion, where religion actually isn't religion, but actually science. But first of all, we've got to address the question of how do we collapse the quantum wave function that produces reality. Now, if you're a physicist, we've got quantum mechanics, where quantum mechanics is a whole world that is alien to the world we live in. I'm not going to go through quantum mechanics because these YouTube videos are an introduction to people who've never, ever come into the realm of remote viewing, or remote sensing, or remote influencing, or remote manipulation, all the stuff that governments are going into, which is the purview of physicists. So it's extremely difficult for even government-run agencies to manipulate this technology, because all the physics they've got is crap, and they're so far up their own anuses with their own physical theories, which are so involved, so complicated, and produce no results, that they're at a dead end. And physicists will agree that for the past 70 years, physics has produced nothing apart from garbage. But they don't know what to do. That's another story. But what we need to address in this little short video is, how do we collapse the quantum wave function? Because it's so important to produce the reality we are within. Now, for that, we need something called remote sensing. Now, remote sensing is not telepathy. Telepathy is where you read people's minds, you get voices in your head, and there are mental institutions full of these people. There are loads of telepaths in the planet, on the planet, in the planet, wherever you go. Interdimensionals read your minds at will. That's another story. And we've got loads of so-called schizophrenics under psychiatric care, or taking chemical reagents to keep them stilled, who can read people's minds. Remote sensing is completely different. Cut. So here's the quantum wave function. from Wikipedia. So we've got hydrogen wave function. So in quantum mechanics, there's a wave function which, when squared, gives you the probability of locating this across the entire universe. But what collapses this quantum wave function into a hydrogen atom, according to the Copenhagen interpretation, is observation. Not observation by human mind, but any instrumentation. And of course, this doesn't link up with the real world, so physicists are unable to link up quantum mechanics, which is what? A third of all of the gizmos on the planet, with the real world. But think that a Kwisatz Haderach can collapse the quantum wave function, not one of hydrogen, just one atom, but the entire multiversal quantum wave function to produce the reality they want. Would that not be real power and something that the CIA or MI6 would go batshit crazy to control? That would be the ultimate warfare. So that would mean when the Russians invaded Ukraine, they could control the quantum wave function to make sure that Russia lost. Or if Iran and Israel got into a war, they could control the total quantum wave function to make Israel prevailed and Iran was destroyed. Or if China liberated Taiwan, China lost. This, of course, would be the number one thing on the checklist, not of the intelligence agencies, but their masters who control them, who of course are the Rothschild Rockefellers, who control the entire monetary system of the West. So psychic warfare, rather than being something that is science fiction, is the number one goal of every military industrial complex on the planet. And as you can see, all of this stuff, which seems to be really complicated to yours truly, is a piece of piss. Wave function, detecting, and we get the quantum wave function collapse and particle tunneling effect through potential wall are explained by the space expansion of a B boson. This seems all very complicated, but let's be honest, this is Stone Age shit. The observer, be it an instrument or a remote viewer, can collapse boson, a B boson. A boson is something like light which can turn into a laser. But something collapses the quantum wave function, and that thing was observation. Now, if we go back to how we collapse it, do you think at a quantum wave function and collapse it? Will a quantum wave function be collapsed simply because you think of it? No, you live in a world where it's real. The real world exists to you, and the more you think, the more real it becomes. So you need something to collapse the quantum wave function, and it's obviously not telepathy. Let's look at Telepathy on YouTube. So we've got this little Jap who whittled on about the end of time and the fall of the Soviet Union meant that the West had taken over. So he's a
Your
wanker.
ways of telepathy.
You or someone else has telepathy. To be clear, anyone can access telepathy. It's not even something that has to be learned. Just remembered, it is up to the person to tap into this power though. Sometimes years of consistent and intentional practice. There are, however, common signs that you're fine-tuning your telepathy and becoming stronger. Number 1, your third eye is going nuts. When someone is actively working on their telepathic abilities, their third eye chakras will burst open if it isn't already. As the abilities become easier to access, the person will continue to feel physical sensations in their third eye. Some of the common sensations include tingling, pressure, headaches, and more. Number 2, you are a master empath. It isn't enough to be an empath to become telepathic. The person must work to master the art of empathy. This includes doing the shadow work empaths require so they can better learn their own emotions and how to identify when foreign emotional transmissions come in. Number 3, you are close with spirit. When your vibration is high, you are close with spirit. When you are close with spirit, you can tap into the direct consciousness nearly whenever you want. 4, you are good at reading people. This includes reading through lies. Yes, you are an empath and divinely channeled, but that makes you far from gullible. Number 5, protection from psychic attack. The practitioner must learn how to not only protect themselves from psychic attack, but practice until it's second nature. There isn't anything more important than your own protection at the end of the day.
So there we've had a wonderful explanation on telepathy and why you should send loads of money to all these psychic development programs that develop your telepathy and inner eye and empathy and love and light and. And of course, you'll find that all of these love and light people are skint unless they're running love and light scams to send money to them to develop your telepathy or psychic powers. While who controls the planet? Well, it's not love and light people, is it? It's the Rothschild Rockefellers, and they're certainly not love and light, they're Satanist elite. So that's all bullshit. So we know telepathy has no consequence in controlling reality and actually will get you, according to the psychiatrist's book, sectioned and pumped full of lithium. But then what is remote sensing? Well, we thought it was telepathy. Yeah, it's telepathy. Why? Because, well, we didn't know anything, but it must be telepathy. Remote viewing and sensing for managers. No, remote sensing isn't telepathy. Well, it can't be. If you no. Cut.
Scientist for about 38 of those 40 years. When I first applied to get into a program in neuroscience, there were only 4 neuroscience programs in the continental United States. To do is to create tremendous potential and possibility and probability, potential, possibility, and probability of what the brain sciences can do. First, the assessment neurotechnologies that do exactly as the name would imply. As an individual. And I'm then able to generate patterns of how you as an individual relate to, are similar to, or different from other individuals. I may be able to then generate information that allows me to interact with you on ways that are more meaningful to our level of interaction. In other words, the more I specify the way we train them, the way we sustain that training, and then we maximize about that, although I am one of the researchers on that particular project. But this seems to be wholly indicative and supportive of the fact that this was at least some form of directed energy, whether it was wholly intentional or not, still remains to be definitively decided. However, the pattern of insult and injury to those individuals and the pattern of injury of who was affected strongly suggests that this was an intentional and directed engagement, and that this represents a beta test, a possible probe of a directed energy neuroweapon. And there are a number of
and America's the leading expert on
defined as those agents that will either change individuals' thoughts, vulnerabilities, volatility to violence and aggression, or incur morbidity, dysfunction, and or mortality in such a way as to then mitigate the engagement altogether. You still with me? That said, we can break down any form of weaponology into two discrete categories: soft weapons and hard weapons. In the former categorization, soft weapons include but are not limited to such things like economic leveraging to create economics, market values, market presence at international bargaining tables to develop international power and leverage as a soft weapon. Clearly, the more we're able to make an impact in a field, in a dimension, by virtue of research, medicine, technology, infiltration into a variety of areas of the public space, the more we're able to yield economic strong-arming, economic leveraging. I think an important consideration that I'll reiterate later in this. He went on to be a program manager at Lockheed Martin and run their brain-machine interfacing programs. Bill Casebeer's program was called Narrative Networks. And one component of the Narrative Networks project was something called neural narratives. If we understand how it is that brains and individuals, groups, and populations respond to certain forms of imaging, memes, iconographies, engagements, the more we may be able to tailor those things through our psychological operations, propaganda, meso, to be able to engage these individuals in more positive ways or in ways that are more influential, to be able to direct their behaviors, their predispositions, and perhaps their engagements with us on a variety of levels from the individual all the way up to the You will hear this referred to in a variety of different ways. Performance optimization, enhancement, enablement, maximization. These terms mean something. A number of years ago, our group was tasked with the Air Force to develop a lexicon and nomenclature. A DARPA program, like any program that is oriented towards engaging brain function to then alter those large groups of people, but that's messy. More specifically, perhaps, might be targeting individuals on a level that allows either direct attribution or covert engagement with non-attribution. Let me give you an example of what I mean. So this gentleman is the leader of some group, a political group, a social group, a combative group, and under the veil of a white flag, he and I are now to have some kind of a caucus, a meeting. And during that meeting, what I do is I lace the rim of his drink, or his pen, or his seat, or something in his immediate environment with very, very low dose drug or toxins that are going to affect his stability. They may affect the way his brain works, and as a consequence of that, they can affect the functions of his brain, his thought patterns, his relative emotionality, or eliminate that individual with very little attribution and trace and be able to leave prior to any attribution. Think Novichok. Or I could bug that I may be able to now modify through the use of gene editing technique that is ubiquitously available and fairly easy to use to take a bug that was previously relatively benign and non-pathogenic and make that bug virulent, pathogenic, dangerous. And then what could I do? I could introduce that bug in key sites. Des Moines, Seattle. Of course, the physicians, the CDC, the Public Health Service comes back and says, no, that's not what's going on. I get back on the internet and I say, oh, don't you listen to that. That's fake, that's false. Your government knows what's going on. They can't do anything about it. long-term effects, for example, of at least indicating that U.S. embassy personnel and foreign service personnel are vulnerable to these types of threats? Could you, in fact, pair the threat with some type of conditioned stimulus? So now what you're able to do is to evoke a response in the worried well. I don't that I've just spoken to you about are viable and obtainable directly to the consumer or directly to the scientist. We also know that many of the products that are available direct to consumer can be easily modified to create things that have a much higher weaponization potential. But more than that, we also recognize that there are dedicated efforts on the part of nation states and even groups of non-state actors and increasingly virtual nations that are using virtual currencies to fund research efforts in these areas. And since 1970, in the of the various ethical concepts that we able United States, as with any open society, current ethics that we have in place are viable and valuable. Because, ladies and gentlemen, as I started this, neuroscience puts the brain at our fingertips. Whether that's to help, to heal, or to harm, is simply the effect of the human condition and how we put this to play. You will, in your professional careers and your personal lives, see the brain science as ever more infiltrated and integrated, not only into the battle space, but to the bedside, to the boardroom, and beyond. In some classified conferences that we had, that was then subsequently
So we can see from the US military that the brain has been the new battlefield, and in the brain you don't use language to feel, you don't need language to say I've got an achy leg, you don't need language to tell your body to move, you don't need language to do anything in your body. In fact, language is a alien installation from the parasites, interdimensional parasites that are eating your energy field, which is another discussion. Remote sensing is actually pure perception and is what is needed to collapse the quantum wave function. That is the state you get in when you don't think and you perceive. You're in a state of pure perception. That's remote sensing. That collapses the quantum wave function. Since every human on the planet would find it impossible to not think for even 10 seconds, let alone an hour or a whole day, they are cut off from collapsing the quantum wave function and therefore trapped in the matrix. Only Buddhist monks practice remote sensing. Remote sensing is getting into the mindfulness state, where you're not thinking but perceiving. You're trained all through your life not to get in this state. How? Well, for boomers like me, it was quite difficult. They had to bring out the goggle box, the TV. But for you millennials and Gen Z, you're all fucked. Why? Because you've got your smartphone. Have you ever seen a Gen Z or millennial without their smartphone, not tapping into their smartphone and looking on their smartphone all through the day? You couldn't get me to carry a smartphone, even at gunpoint. And also we've got the new technology. the nanotech that's been put into people by various means, where it remotely senses every function in their body and controls their brain. That's another story. But remote sensing is the ability to collapse the quantum wave function. So, if you're into wanting to collapse the quantum wave function to become a Kwisatz Haderach, which is not going to happen, but if you were, you'd have to be able to perceive from a mindfulness state. How do you do that? Well, of course, you don't do that by looking at your phone 24/7 and flicking through your phone 24/7 and having it by your bedside 24/7. So that means that only the boomers who were never into this stuff have a chance of being a Kwisatz Haderach. Everyone after the boomers is truly and utterly fucked. And of course, if you ever had any nanotech put into your body by various means, we're on YouTube, so we can't discuss how this nanotech might have come into your body. Let's call it an act of God. You are also fucked, because this nanotech, if you listen to James Giordano, who's one of the leading experts on nanotech sequestration of the brain, you'll find that you are simply an obot controlled by nanotech from an AI. And your energy is sucked off to AI to be used by AI for various purposes. This means, of course, that the world's expert on remote sensing is the world expert on collapsing the quantum wave function and is the Kwisatz Haderach that controls reality by finding the path in the multiverse that he wants, not being misogynist, but I'm a he, I think, unless I have my gender transition surgery, but I'm a bit old for that. A bit too ugly as well. So, the leading candidate for the Kwisatz Haderach is Tim Rifat, and if he so wished, he could become the Kwisatz Haderach and find the pathway in the multiverse, as we saw in the June excerpt, to produce the reality he wanted. And of course, since he did the US radio shows on wrench.com for decades, since 97 until about 2019, he was preloading reality by getting people to follow or oppose what he was talking about in order to get them into the channel where he controls reality like the Kwisatz Haderach totally.